ॐ निरञ्जनं नित्यम् अनन्तरूपं भक्तानुकम्पाधृतविग्रहं वै ईशावतारं परमेशमिड्यं तं रामकृष्णं शिरसा नमाम जननीं शारदां देवीं रामकृष्णं जगद्गुरुं पादपद्मे तयो श्रुत्वा प्रणमामि मुहुर्मुहुः नमः श्रीयतिराजाय विवेकानन्दसूरये सच्चिद्सुखस्वरूपाय स्वामिने तापहारिणे. So we were studying the sixth chapter of Swami Vivekananda's Karma Yoga. There are totally 8 chapters. So this will be followed by another 2 chapters, and then we will be concluding for the time being the study of Swami Vivekananda's Karma Yoga. So the sixth chapter, it is the name of the chapter. It is the annihilation, that the self-effacement is, after all, the goal of Karma Yoga. So the non-attachment actually means complete self-abnegation. So that's the title of the chapter. So in which we found that Swami Vivekananda has entered the section where he is discussing. What he's discussing? That there cannot be any karma, there cannot be any action which is purely good. The purely white action is not possible. In this world, neither pure white nor pure black. This pure evil, that also is not possible. All the actions are to a certain extent tinged. Maybe that predominantly it's a good action, but it has a tinge of evil in it. And however evil an action may be, we will find it has a tinge of goodness in it. There cannot be purely good and purely bad action. So now why Swami Vivekananda is bringing this idea into his lecture? The idea we will find, actually Swami Vivekananda's background we should always keep in our mind. He's in the West, he's in the States, where the predominant religion is Christianity. So he's the audience. He being an Orient from the first time, he's addressing the people who are from that Christian background. And in Christianity, we find in the theology, in the Christian theology, one of the big problem is the problem of evil. The big question is that if the creation has came out from God, God is the creator, who is all good, then how come there is so much evil in this world? So this is the basic question of the problem of evil. That if God is all good, from whom has emanated this entire creation, then how does the evil exists in the creation? So here we find this is the thing which Christianity has to answer, and that's why we find the concept of evil as a separate personality, as Satan, has came into existence. That it is that almost the eternal fight of the good and the evil, and the idea is there that God is all powerful. At last, the goodness will win. The evil has to be destroyed. It cannot, though it is there, it cannot be omnipotent. It is not omnipotent. It is a God who is the omnipotent, all powerful. So the more we resort to goodness, the more the evil is annihilated, is reduced and annihilated. So that's the idea we find. It's a huge topic of theology. Just to give the main idea behind it, I'm just making these few lines, that the evil cannot be something which has been produced by God, which has been created by God, who is all good. So that's why It has been ascribed, that all the evil has been ascribed to Satan. He is the personification of all evil. And the more we resort to goodness, the more the evil is destroyed, annihilated, attenuated. And a day will come where goodness alone will prevail. And there is the idea of millennium, and there's so many ideas which actually indicates to that at last the goodness will prevail. So from this standpoint, taking this standpoint of the Christianity, there's background of all the audience, Swami Vivekananda is actually bringing this topic of that there cannot be any action which is purely good or purely evil. So the same question from the Vedantic perspective is seen in a different way. What's that? That God as such is, of course, not pure, not good. The idea of goodness and evil is to this phenomenal existence. When we find the Abrahamic religion, they are saying God is all good. In the Vedantic way of saying is God is beyond good and evil. The goodness and the evil, these are something which belongs to the phenomenal existence. In some other lectures, Swami Vivekananda is using some example to explain this, some analogy he's using to explain this idea. He's saying, suppose the dog is resting and it has it's the young ones, the cubs, the small ones, the puppies. And the puppies, they are, in some that they have started just fighting with each other. So the Swamiji is saying for the mother dog, she is not at all perturbed. She knows it's just the childish play of the puppies. They're just small puppies. That's how they behave. So she is not perturbed. But if you go to the perspective of those puppies, it is something, a very serious matter to them. That fight is something that I have to win or I cannot lose. And if I lose, then my other sibling was bossing over me. All those complaints will be there. Even in what to speak of the dog, even in the human society. That's the thing. When the small children are fighting with each other, it's something very serious. But we as the parent take it, oh, it's all childish prank. So that's the example Swamiji is saying, that from the God's point of view, what we are doing is a mere childish play. He is beyond good and evil. And to give an example, Vedanta says what? That this world is not exactly a creation of God. It is actually projection. This too has a bit difference. It was projection, that he has not created something out of nothing. It is actually the God himself is being projected. The Brahman actually is being projected as the universe. To give an example, let us take an example. The white light, when it is in presence of the prism, when you keep a prism in proximity of the white light, immediately it breaks into the spectrum. From one side of the prism, it is pure white light. On the other side of the prism, it is the spectrum, the 7 colors. So why we are giving this example? There's in Vedanta, they say that when the mind comes into picture, from where the mind came, if God alone is there. So here we find Vedanta is never interested in answering that question. He's not interested. That's why they have termed the term ignorance. We don't know. It has happened. How you know it has happened? Because as an ordinary limited being, I, through my spiritual realization, can realize. So the spiritual realization can take me to that experience that there is only one non-dual existence. This local I, this local sense of ego, that I am, if I close my eyes, ears, everything, and just to think who I am, I cannot get rid of the idea that I constantly emanating. But that sense of I has a locality. I cannot get rid of that locality, that I am in space time at certain place sitting, from where that idea of I is emanating. If I open my eyes, that I, through my eyes, can say that it is I who can see the galaxies. And I can imagine, even the last galaxy, which the science has said that is the last, I can imagine, no, there must be something beyond that. So when the I is finding expression through my mind, it has no limit. It is that you cannot say that that as the visible world ends here, there is no such till now the science haven't found where the visible world ends. But just for sorry, the sake of example, we take that the physical world ends here. But with my imagination, I can even go beyond that. So this I at present is a localized being which has a center but which has no circumference. That's what Swami Vivekananda in some other place is saying. That this individuality, these individuals, we as individual are a circle which has a center but which has no circumference. What actually is meant by spiritual realization? Now, Advaita stands it has a very strong foothold, not because its theology can be proven in the way we practice the Vedanta. A wonderful thing, what the Vedanta is saying, the echo of it you will find in the mystics of all the religion. Those who have practiced the religion, they were not just mere satisfied by some doctrines and dogmas and just kept their religion only to some belief. The religion, they lived that religion, that intensely they lived. If you go to the mystics of any of the tradition, whether it is the Islam, you go to the Sufis, whether it is the Christian mystics, any religion, even in what you said, this Judaism, everywhere we find this mystics, they are speaking of unity. That there is that in the words of Meister Eckhart, that infinity lies in each and every moment. They all, as they're speaking the same language, there's an echo of the Vedanta there. That's why Sri Ramakrishna used to say that when you go to the realization, there you will find all the fox are howling in the same manner. In the forest, it happens. When one fox howls, immediately you will find all other foxes resonating, echoing, as if consenting to what that the first fox has howled. So Ramakrishna is saying, when you go to that realization, then you find all are as if howling in the same manner. All the differences in the doctrines and the dogmas. When you go to the realization, the mystic realization, they all speak of that unity. So in short, it is something ineffable. It cannot be described, but it is something noetic, that realization. Means you have a conviction that what I have seen is not a mere imagination. It is something which I have conviction, the way I am seeing, suppose a flower in my presence. I have seen the truth that way. It is something palpable. And what's that palpable truth? That this I, the sense of I, which I find at present is localized. When I go to that realization, that sense of I is still there, but it has lost its locality. You cannot just locate it where it is in space, time, causation. All these factors no more works with that I. It has become something non-local. That's one thing. And another thing, of course, when you are in that intense realization, you go beyond your mind and senses. And as a result, what happened? This phenomenal existence seems to be no more there. It has vanished. And that only thing is there is that I. I am, but that I am is not no more located just within the body, sitting somewhere. There's a difference between this I and that I. That's why in Vedanta they use the two terms, Atman and Brahman. The I which is within is Atman. And the same I is been equated with Brahman. That when you go to that realization, the same Atman. It is not that Brahman is there, Atman is separate, and there is a unification. No. That Atman, which at present is having the sense of locality, that loses the sense of locality. That's why this word Brahman, if you go to the real meaning, it came from Brih Dhatu, which means Brihat, which means big, which means all encompassing. So you'll find in Vedanta, this is a wonderful idea. This Atman and Brahman are the same. It's because of the ignorance, when it gets localized within this body-mind complex, I feel it is as if just limited within the psychophysical existence. When you go to that realization, you find that amness alone exists. Everything has as if projected from that. And now, how it has projected, that Vedanta says we don't know. But the realization says us that this spectrum falls off. When the mind called prism is taken away, the spectrum falls off, and you find that I am that white light. I am that non-dual, eternal conscious principle. So now, from this standpoint, it is not creation, it's projection. Somehow the mind came into existence, and this non-dual amness is being projected as this world of name and form with various spectrums. There are so many spectrums. So now, the good and evil, how is Vedanta is defining? These are the various spectrums, nothing else. That's why Swamiji is saying that we never say good and evil. We say good, better, best. This world, nothing is evil. That at what you say as evil is actually a particular state of existence from where when we evolve. It's a question of comparison. From that evolved state, we say this is bad. Actually, nothing is bad. It is just a gradation. Just like the way the spectrums are graded, it is all gradation. Very interesting. What happens when I, in the phenomenal existence, am trying to make all good? Now we know that when the light falls on the prism, we are just taking an example. It breaks into a spectrum. Now, if I identify myself with the red spectrum, what I will try? I will say that the red spectrum should encompass the entire existence. The other spectrum should vanish. So how to make the red spectrum encompass the entire phenomenal existence? To make it bigger, you take if the prism is there and the screen is there, the farther you take the screen, the more the spectrum gets broadened, because of the angle, it gets broadened. But another thing, the other spectrums are also getting broadened. That's why Swamiji in one place very, very nicely he told that if goodness increases in geometrical progression, evil increases in goodness increases in arithmetical progression, just in plus, and then you will find that 1 + 1 is 2, but evil is increasing in geometrical progression. It won't be 2 into 2, 4, and again into 2, it will be now 8. If you just arithmetical progression is 2 + 2 + 2, that is, it is becoming 6. But geometrical progression is progressing at a much faster rate. It becomes almost exponential. And we find it is true in this world that however we may try to get rid of the evil, has it really reduced? God has incarnated, has delivered the truth to the humankind, and we find that what a mess we have made out of it. Every attempt, all the isms came, democracy came, communism came, socialism came. Has the world changed? In the words of Swami Vivekananda, the world is like an old rheumatic patient. In rheumatism, if you have pain in your, say, knees, and you give a nice massage, the pain from the knees vanishes, and it just shifts, and then you find the pain is in the ankle. So it doesn't vanish, it just shifts. You will find the evil goes on shifting. To give an example, just sometimes the way the entire history of communism has been described, that in the attempt to bring equality among all, what has happened at last? Only the roles have changed. Equality didn't come. The landlord was sitting on the top of the horse and was whipping the laborer. And after the revolution, what has happened? The roles have changed. Now you will find the laborer is sitting on the top of the horse, the landlord is standing on the ground, and it is the laborer who is whipping the landlord. If you study this entire socialism, you will find that has happened. Though the aim was very good, ism, the idea was very good, but at last, did we achieve it? Nowhere. It was never successful. It's not only just, I'm just giving the example of the communism, anyism, democracy, is it successful? No, you find it has its own defects. In this world, that we started with that idea that with the goodness, we will conquer all evil. And that's the way, with the Christian background, the entire Western world is progressing. And Swami Vivekananda, from the Eastern background, is going there and addressing them. 100 years back, he has told the bland truth. It is never possible. Still, most probably, many of us are not convinced of that idea. Swamiji says it's never possible. The, if the only way it is possible is go beyond the spectrum, go beyond good and evil. If I think of making the red spectrum to be all pervasive, know it for certain, the bigger it becomes, the bigger the other spectrums become. So in this society, that's how good and evil are intertwined. When you see the projection, immediately it has to be divided into various spectrums. I cannot think of perfection in the spectrum. Go beyond the mind. How to go beyond the mind? To By attachment, by self-abnegation. It is this limited sense of identity that has created the spectrum. If I can go beyond that, then the good as well as the evil both falls off. Otherwise, good and evil are the obverse and reverse of the same coin. So this is the basic distinction, where we find that from the Christian background, they're trying to define God as good, and then finding it's a big problem to uh, define the evil, that how come the evil comes into existence if God is all good and if the entire creation came out from God. So there's a big, what finds the difficulty in explaining. So from that standpoint, Swamiji is bringing the idea of God is beyond good and evil, is neither the way we think good and evil, that is something which is in our level of understanding. From God, that way of understanding good and evil doesn't exist at all, is beyond that. And to go beyond that is our spiritual goal. And karma yoga, like any other yoga, is a way that to go beyond both good and evil. So now let us go with this background. Let us gradually enter into the discussion of what Swami Vivekananda is saying, is delivering in this lecture. So that being the case, it naturally follows that perfection can never be attained by work. We may work through all eternity, but there will be no way out of this intricate maze. You may work on and on and on. There will be no end to this inevitable association of good and evil in the results of work. The second point to consider is, what is the end of work? We find the vast majority of people in every country believing that there will be a time when the world will become perfect, when there will be no disease, no death, nor unhappiness, nor wickedness. You'll find it still going on, that the medical science is advancing. For the present coronavirus situation, previously the vaccinations, now the vaccination is so advanced. Within 1 year, the vaccination is coming. They're having this RNA vaccination. The science could have never thought of even 50 years, 60 years back. But have we really overcome the evil? Disease also is coming in new forms. All the so-called diseases we have thought of, which never existed, but now these are all new types of diseases are coming. New type of viral infections are coming. So never you will find that with the advancement is happening, as we were told, that you are increasing the red spectrum by taking the screen away from the prism. But along with that, the other spectrums are also increasing. So this evil also finds expression more and more when we're trying to do good to the world. You can never find a time. It's an illusion if you think that a time will come when we will really get rid of disease, death, by the medical advancement. We'll get rid of all evils of the society with the social advancement. So that is never possible. That's the Vedanta's assertion. You may go on through eternity, you can never do it. So that is a very good idea. Then Swamiji is saying it's a good idea. Why it is a good idea? Because it motives us to do something good. It's a very good idea, a very good motive power to inspire and uplift the ignorant. But if we think for a moment, we shall find on the very face of it that it cannot be so. So this line, I will just, someone asked me in India, this time when I visited last year, that you all go to the West and just preach the Vedanta. But why should they take Vedanta? Now that we are not in a way to just really try to, what you say, that preach Vedanta. It's just our way of life we are doing. But he thought it that way and told that way. That why, because, and then I said, why you are saying that? What, from what background? The Western world is so advanced. You see its city, you see its the roads, the parks, the buildings, everything so neat and clean. And in India, you find everything chaotic. And with this, the Vedanta from this background, the people will just see the result. What's the result? With all your religion, what have you done? And they will just say, see this. And so this is actually the basic difference in the way we think of the ultimate reality. So why has you see the external prosperity? Yes, it has this, because there's tremendous motive power. When you say that all the evil can be got rid of, what is heaven? Heaven is all good minus the evil. That's all the ideas of goodness which we have, minus the evil, is the heaven. And as per the Christian background, heaven is the highest ideal, where I can annihilate all the evil and just have only goodness. That being the highest ideal, that's what I try to practice in my day-to-day life. And that's how you got such a prosperous material civilization. Material, it's really that way. It's really progressing. And this from the Indian background, from the Vedantic background, or from the Buddhist background, that the ultimate real is beyond good and evil. So there we find that's why it has something, it has as if people have nothing to do with this external so-called material progress. We have to dive within and go beyond both good and evil. And that's why it appears to be so chaotic externally. But that doesn't that way prove that this Vedanta, if we are taking a different benchmark to compare these two things. It's a totally different benchmark. If you are really taking the material progress as a benchmark, of course, that this idea doesn't help us to progress materially. But at the same time, does it really help us spiritually to give a sense of fulfillment of life? With all the material progress, at the first thing is you just relate to it with awe. But when the awness has gone, when you try to really find out that what actually it is, at last you will find that there's a tremendous sense of meaninglessness. Because after all, you find that with all the advancement at last, you cannot get rid of the evil. It is coming in a different way. If in the physical level, I try to get rid of all the evils, I find in the mentally, I'm getting more affected in the form of depression, meaninglessness. Somehow, the evil we cannot get rid of. Swami Vivekananda, in one place, he told a wonderful thing, that, the biggest problem with us is what? That whenever we think of progress, we take only the physical world into our existence. But even in our day-to-day life, really how much the physical existence matters. It's our mind which matters. Just to give a common example, suppose I earned a lot. I got a good profession. And why? To have a nice house, to have a nice car, to have all the amenities, modern amenities. I managed with all so much labor I managed. But when you're staying there, all the amenities which you have availed with so much of labor, how much time do you really spend getting involved with that? Most of the time you are alone with your own mind. The biggest enemy of man is the leisure, if he has not known how to use that leisure. With all your material gain, at last you get leisure and you don't know what to do with the leisure. So this, see the paradox. I don't know what to do with the leisure. We got with all, because I thought the material progress alone is the progress. What about the mind, with which I have to deal most of my time? With all the materialism, it will just involve only a very small part of my life. Rest of the time, I'm left out with my mind and I don't know what to do. So that's, now you will find just why we are saying this, to contrast that it's a very good motive power, but there is a flaw in it. It cannot be the highest. It is required. But along with that, we have to take care of our spiritual growth with all the material growth. This should run hand in hand. Otherwise, there can never be the real sense of fulfillment in our life. So it's a good motive power. But we will find that it is not something which is all perfect. So that it is a very good idea, a very good motive power to inspire and uplift the ignorant. But if we think for a moment, we shall find on the very face of it that it cannot be so. How can it be, seeing that good and evil are the obverse and reverse of the same coin? How can you have good without evil at the same time? What is meant by perfection? A perfect life is a contradiction in terms. There cannot be something called perfect life, because the word life itself means what? That I, as in that in the from the Vedanta perspective, I as that non-local consciousness was beyond all need. But the moment I get identified with a particular body, just to say a microbe, take a microbe. In the Petri dish, I am just seeing through a microscope that how the microbes behave. If I put some nutrients, it are drawn towards it. If I put some toxin, it moves away from it. The stimuli response speaks of life. And what stimuli response speaks of? The things which, once I get identified with the psychophysical existence, the things which are favorable for its existence. As now I have identified with the body, my existence has been identified with that body, the things which are favorable for it, that I think has to be good. The thing which is not favorable for its existence, I think to be bad. And constantly this fight has to be there. In a life without this struggle, I cannot think of life. Swamiji will come to an example that sometimes we may think that let us in no way interact with the world so that I in no way harm the world. But you know what happens? Even if I resign from all my activities and I'm sitting in my room thinking that I'm in no way harming anyone, is it the fact? No. The one who doesn't harm anyone is a dead body. The moment we die, you will find it takes only few hours. The body will start decomposing. Why my body doesn't decompose? Why a dead body starts decomposing? Because constantly I'm fighting. Through my breath, the microbes are entering my body. The antigens, the antibodies, the white blood corpuscles, they are there. They are there as the army, constantly fighting. Even when I am sitting idly, I am thinking I'm not harming anyone. It cannot be. So that's why life is a contradiction in terms. In Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, it has been told, Ashanaya hi mrityu. Hunger is death. The moment you are hungry, it means death to someone else. How can life be perfect? Sometimes we find that's why we try to please ourselves. We say that God has actually has created the entire universe for us, the sun, the moon, the food, the animals. It's a very selfish way of understanding, not seeing the other spectrum where it is all evil. I'm just limiting my spectrum and thinking, wow, God has created for me. But is it really perfect? If I take the entire creation just as a whole, and that type of awareness is growing more and more, because in the present day we find that we cannot exist apart from the entire creation. In our attempt to have more and more prosperity, we have already damaged the entire environment. In turn, we are getting affected. Global warming, this ozone hole, whatever you may say, it is our creation, because the goodness is something which has a broader spectrum. We have to include them. That idea that God has created everything for me to enjoy, so that that idea itself is full of flaws. That cannot be. It's a coexisting world. So we will find this is the idea, a perfect life is contradiction in terms. It can never be. It's a constant interaction, constant fight. Life itself is a state of continuous struggle between ourselves and everything outside. Every moment we are fighting actually with the external nature. And if we are defeated, our life has to go. It is, for instance, a continuous struggle for food and air. If food and air fails, we die. Life is not a simple and smoothly flowing thing, but it is a compound effect. This complex struggle between something inside and the external world is what we call life. So it is clear that when this struggle ceases, there will be an end of life. So that's what we were saying. There is no struggle in the dead body. Struggle, they have stopped the struggle and immediately you find it starts decomposing. Otherwise, we're constantly, life means struggle, constantly. Whether we are taking food or not, as long as I'm alive, I'm killing. There are many who say uh, that yes, we cannot avoid killing, but it's better always not to avoid not taking the higher life of the higher forms of life, the vegetarianism, the veganism, because for them the consciousness is something more palpable. But actually, it is not so. Suffering is something which is same for all. Suffering is like a gas. Just if I take a small amount of gas and leave it in a room, a vacuum, a room which is totally vacuum, the gas won't just sit in one place, in one corner. It will immediately spread in that entire room. And if I have a larger volume of gas, that also will spread. Everyone thinks my suffering no one can understand. My suffering is so intense. In this world, you will find, if you just ask, that no one suffers like me. Actually, it's not the quantity of suffering. The suffering's nature is such, it just pervades. If anyone says, when I eat the plant doesn't suffer, it is actually just masking. It is not the truth. But, when anyone is hanged, his face is first covered. Why, that so that do not see the reaction in that face, because that affects me. So first I will mask him, put a mask on that man's face, and then hang him, so that the reaction, the pain, I don't see, I don't relate. When I say that the lower forms of animals, when I don't kill the higher, it's only masking. The suffering is the same. It's just total rubbish when we say that it's only the higher forms suffer more and the lower forms doesn't suffer. They suffer the same way, but it has been masked. As my level of awareness is not to the same level of awareness of them, it has just been masked. And I feel that they don't suffer. Just the way to not to relate to the suffering of the man who is being hanged, I mask him. It's almost the same way the nature has masked. These all type of arguments are actually totally rubbish. The fact is, life is not possible without killing others. It's a fact. So why Swamiji is taking is all this point? Just to give a different paradigm. Otherwise, we become fanatic. To accept the truth and then to find out the way out. So that's why Swamiji is taking through this type of discussion. The complex struggle. So let us go back to his words. The complex struggle between something inside and the external world is what we call life. So it is clear that when this struggle ceases, there will be an end of life. What is meant by ideal happiness is the cessation of the struggle, but then life will cease. For the struggle can only cease when life itself has ceased. So what's the ideal happiness? So that's the thing. Swamiji now will be bringing the point to his discussion. Then what's the way out? If we think just by doing good, at last we will inherit evil, it's not going to be. It's actually to go beyond good and evil by getting rid of this limited sense of I, ego. Still we have to do good, but not with the attempt to do good to the world. If I do good to the others, what I'm doing actually, I am giving the importance to this I, it becomes secondary. Someone else's interest becomes primary. That way you are annihilating the ego. So Swamiji is what he's saying is very interesting thing. That doing good is okay, but change the motivation behind it. If you just think that I will just change the world, at last you will turn into a fanatic. You will find no changes happening, and you find that there are so many factors who are detrimental for my progress, and I become fanatic. I just become a howling fanatic. I go on shouting against them, killing them. If I did the same work with the idea that the world remains as it is, even with my help, it is not going to change. And world is not waiting for me to help it out. Even if with all my resource, with all my attempt, the moment that the day I die, the world continues. The world won't stop that such and such great person has died, and the world won't stop. It goes on its own way with its good and evil. But still, why should I then do good? Should I then stop doing good? No. That there's for when I'm doing good, the another aspect of it is there which we should be aware of. Whenever I'm doing good to the world, when I'm helping others, the other person has become important, and that my own interest has become secondary. That way, I am abnegating my ego, and the more I can do that, the more I can go beyond that prism called the mind, that prism called the mind. Now, on the other side, at the same time, when the prism is there, in one side you see the white light, the other side the spectrum. These are not two separate existence. When the white light is there, at the same time the spectrum is there. Only when you are seeing through the mind, through the prism of mind, then it becomes a spectrum. When you go beyond it, it is always that hot light. It has not changed into the spectrum. So go beyond the mind. Immediately there's a shift in the awareness, and you find it's all play. This projection is a play. These things which were taking real, when the puppies are just fighting with each other, they take it so real. But from the mother's standpoint, it's all play. So you have gone to that standpoint. Now this good and evil, nothing affects you. Go beyond them. And the way is by doing good. But at the same time, not thinking by doing good, I'm going to change the world. That expectation should go. And doing good, by that constantly, I am effacing my ego with each and every act. That is a self-purification process. So that's the idea which Swamiji will now bring into his discussion. So let us read his words, and then we will again go to the discussion. We have seen already that in helping the world, we help ourselves. So that's the point which Swamiji is bringing now. The main effect of work done for others is to purify ourselves. By means of the constant effort to do good to others, we are trying to forget ourselves. This forgetfulness of self is the one great lesson we have to learn in life. This is the lesson. If I think that by doing good I'm going to change the world, that at last will turn me into a fanatic, horrible fanatic. But if I have this idea that I have tried my best to do good to the world, why have tried my best? Because nowadays, even in science, they are saying that the Darwin's ideas have modified a lot. That is, it is not competition. That in our genes, there is altruism. As if we are being programmed to be kind to others, to help others. It has been programmed within us. If we take that standpoint, a devotee, how he can relate to this idea of this science, still he can relate. That God has made me in such a way that through me, his compassion is working. His love is working. When the mother loves the child, it is not the credit of the mother. Can you show me a single mother? What to speak of human beings? Even in the animal kingdom, where the mother is not ready to give away her life for the child, even in the animal kingdom, it is there. So it is not the credit of the mother. The creation is such. God has created in such a way that we have to be compassionate. We have to be loving. God is taking care of his creation, for which we are the mere channels. So now the expectation should go. It is all the goodness which I am trying to practice in my life is because of that altruism, the genes, the in the genes, that altruistic genes. I am bound to do it. I am just the channel through which the God's love is working. So I have no result, hankering for result. God knows best why He is working through me that way. I am just the instrument. I just simply surrender to Him. I have no hankering for the result. And then that's action. What is happening? Becoming karma yoga. That without any hankering, that I have resigned myself to the divine. That's what the entire Bhagavad Gita at last they say, the Sharanagati. Sometimes someone thinks that I have to leave my work and just be, what you say, that resigned to God. No. Actually, when I am working, you should know that is a proper resignation there itself. You don't have to come out of the work. That what's the resignation? That it's actually not I am working. I am. So Swami Ramakrishnananda, one of the disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, he was sent to the South India to develop the centers there. Swami Vivekananda sent him. And he did a marvelous job. In the South India, all the centers which we have is to a great extent, it is the influence of Swami Ramakrishnananda by which it all developed. And when someone seeing him, they're doing such a huge work, quantity of work, asked him that Swamiji, how come is it possible that for one person to have done so much of work? Ramakrishna's reply was wonderful. He used to say, a poet wrote volumes of books with the pen. Does the pen say, I have written? I am the pen. Someone is holding me. So that's the idea, wonderful idea of karma yoga. That all the actions I am doing, there's no question of ego. That I'm just the channel through which the God's love is working. So that way, when it is just a change of the paradigm. The same work continues, but without any expectation. I am doing it just with the idea of seek not, avoid not. God has kept me in a particular situation. It's a huge teamwork, yajna. Yajna is a teamwork. The entire world, no one exists alone, segregated. It's a constant interaction. All are in some way linked with others. In this great teamwork, I have a certain role to play. That's how God has created me. So I don't avoid. I take, but at the same time, I don't seek that all these things I have done for that I should get this and this result. So if I do that is the Sharanagati. Sharanagati doesn't mean resignation, that I leave my family and everything and I just, from morning and evening, I say, oh God. That's not the thing. With all my activities, I'm going on with the idea. I don't hanker after it, nor I avoid, because after all, God has kept me. There's a much bigger plan of which I don't know. Let me just resign to it. So this becomes karma yoga. By means of constant effort to do good to others, we are trying to forget ourselves. This forgetfulness of self is one of the great lessons we have to learn in life. So this idea we find wonderfully expressed by Sri Ramakrishna. When someone asked him, Sir, when shall I be free? It was in Bengali. Ami mukto hobo kobe. Ramakrishna used to play a wonderful pun with the words. Immediately in another one sentence he gave the reply. When shall I be free? His answer was, when I cease to be. That I, it's a paradox. When you say, when shall I be free? That this limited I can never be free with that all its limitation. This limit I has to vanish. This old man has to go. Even you will find in the Bible, they say that Swamiji will refer to, the old man must die. This limited ego has to go off. And karma yoga is one of the best way for doing that. Because by each and every good action, I am subjugating my ego, not giving importance to that. Others' interest becomes my interest. And that's how I'm moving out. And that is the forgetfulness of the self, which we can practice through karma yoga. And that's the only practice for spiritual growth. Means whatever, whether you are a jnani or a bhakta or a karma yogi. At last, everyone is trying to efface the ego in their own way. The ways may be different, but the purpose, all the practices, the aim of all the practices is the same. Is the effacement of the ego, is a self-abnegation. So that's what Swamiji is now discussing. Let us again go to the words of Swami Vivekananda. Man thinks foolishly that he can make himself happy, and after years of struggle, finds out at last that true happiness consists in killing selfishness, and that no one can make him happy except himself. Every act of charity, every thought of sympathy, every action of help, every good deed is taking so much of self importance away from our little selves and making us think of ourselves as the lowest and the least, and therefore it is all good. Here we find jnana, bhakti, and karma all come to one point. The highest idea is eternal and entire self abnegation, where there is no I, but all is thou. And whether he is conscious or unconscious of it, Karma Yoga leads a man to that end. Now, Swamiji will be speaking that the bhakta sometimes is so much eager to keep his individuality. In the words of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, আমি চিনি হতে চাই না, চিনি খেতে চাই. It's actually been spoken by Ram Prasad in one of his songs. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also referred to it, that I don't want to be sugar, I want to taste sugar. As per Advaita Vedanta, that you as it become the sugar, one with the absolute reality. So here it's more a question of what you're liking, not of the real actual reality, that I don't want to be that. I want to taste the sugar. I want to maintain my individual, this identity. But even when you're trying to maintain your individual identity, actually you're constantly practicing self-effacement. That's the only spiritual practice. That's what Swami Vivekananda will indicate. A religious preacher, in the words of Swamiji now, let us come, may become horrified at the idea of an impersonal God. He may insist on a personal God and wish to keep up his own identity and individuality, whatever he may mean by that. But his ideas of ethics, if they are really good, cannot but be based on the highest self-abnegation. The one who is saying that I don't want to be the sugar, I want to taste sugar, but as for the practice is concerned, what he is saying? Trinadapi Shunichena. So this is one of the stanzas of the Shikshashtakam. Of all the Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's work, written work, only these 6 stanzas remain. He was an erudite scholar, but nothing remains of as such of his literary work. Only 6 stanzas, Shikshashtakam, they're really extremely powerful. The entire spiritual, our journey, our attitude, our orientation, what it should be, in the 6 stanzas, in a wonderful way he has written. One of the stanza, what he's saying? Trinadapi Shunichena, Taroriva Shahishtana, Amanina Manadena, Kirtaniya Sadahari. That Kirtaniya Sadahari comes last. Go on praising the Lord. Go on thinking of the Lord. There's a last phrase. Before that, these practices he's speaking, which speaks of self-abnegation, that first just shed off all the dross from that other, the so-called your worldly material ego, by becoming humble. Humble, what's that humility like? Trinadapi, even like a grass, a small grass, you become something humble than that. The grass is so humble that when anyone walks over it, it immediately, it's pressed by it. It never dies. It allows everyone to walk through it. It is never having any as such complaint. It is forbearing. There's so much that of onslaught going on constantly over him. So be as humble as that. Taroriva Shahishnura. Be forbearing like a tree. The tree is there for all good. It gives fruit, it gives shade, and we constantly, what we do is we go and cut the trees. We break its branches. Constantly, the onslaught on the tree is going on, but the tree in never is taking revenge. It is there always. What, however we may maltreat it, it is there always to give us shade, to give us fruit, to give us food. So be as forbearing as the tree, Tarodiva Shahishtana. Amanina manadina. Even to the humblest person, you should always relate to him through respect, reverence, as if he is the holier than the holiest person. So that way you should relate to the entire creation through that respect. And then Kirtanyasa. So isn't it self-abnegation? That's the practice which he's speaking of. That whether I'm a devotee or whether I'm a jnani, at last you will find the practice ends up in self-abnegation. That is the thing which is being indicated. That's what Swamiji is also saying. That though he is horrified with the idea of an impersonal God, he always wants to maintain his individuality and to relate to a God in a very personal way. He also will find actual the spiritual practice is nothing but self-abnegation. And this is the basis. That's when the Swamiji is saying it is the basis of all morality. You may extend it to men or animals or angels. It is the one basic idea, the one fundamental principle running through all ethical systems. And then Swamiji, the next paragraph is very interesting, that you will find, we will end up with the first line of that paragraph. And that's very interesting paragraph. We will continue the next class. But this one line we will just read and just try to relate to it. You will find various classes of men in this world. He will actually speak of 4 classes of men. The first, you will find we can relate from whatever religious denomination we may belong to, whatever our faith may be. If we try to relate to our own this religious illuminaries, or even if to the religious illuminaries of the other religion, what's the common thing you will find? That's the first category. First, there are the godmen whose self-abnegation is complete, who do only good to others even at the sacrifice of their own lives. Any religion, whether it is Jesus, whether it is Buddha, whether it is Shankaracharya, whether it is Madhvacharya, whether it is Ramakrishna, whether it is Swamiji, you will find they're ready even to give away their own lives for doing good to the world. For Jesus, there is no need for explanation. Buddha, we will find the same thing. Even immediately after the realization, after the nirvana, the first thought came that what's there in this life? Just let me give up the life, because it is also as such an illusion. It's a flow. And immediately the next moment, the huge compassion came. What's that? That if I don't just stay in this physical body and let the human being know that what's the treasure is there within this, our so-called apparent self, they will remain in dark. This out of compassion is moving out. Even in his deathbed, we are finding the same thing, the Buddha. When others are worried about his health, he is not at all, what you say, that in any way he is not going to stop anyone from coming to him and instruct. Till the last moment, he's instructing people. So you will find that each and every, the self-abnegation, in Shankaracharya's life also, that the one is Advaitin, when some Kapalika came and told that I want to sacrifice you, because the bigger the sacrifice, the better result I accrue, immediately agreed. It's his disciples who saved him. But we find that the idea of self-abnegation is something common in all the great person, all the so-called spiritual luminaries. That's the thing which we all relate to. Even if I may be, that Swami Vivekananda will give an example, that from the Christian background, we believe in God, but we will find that even the so-called, even if you are a Christian, you have a reverence for Buddha, the one who doesn't believe in God. Why? Because he is ready to sacrifice his life for an animal. In those days, the yajnas were there, and in which the animals were killed. That is the one of the evil practices that has developed out of the religion, so-called religion. Elaborate rituals where the animals were sacrificed. Buddha was the one who was against it. And the same thing that Buddha is asking when he saw that animal was to be killed, that why you are going to sacrifice that animal, that I will accrue good merits. That was the belief. And then Buddha asked that if it's a higher animal, if you sacrifice an animal which is highly evolved, isn't your merit will be more? Well, yes, of course. Then he is saying that why you are going to sacrifice this animal? Leave it. I am here to give away my life. So everywhere you find it is this. And when we read this story, whatever may be your background, immediately your head bows down in reverence. This self-abnegation. So that's the thing. There's the first category, who is ready to help out the world even at the cost of his own life. There's this pure unselfishness. That's the first category. The remaining 4 categories he will speak of. That we will take up. Remaining 3 categories, total 4. In the next class, we will take up. And why he's saying all this? Just to highlight the point. At last, it is abnegation, which alone is the highest ideal. And that's all we should aspire for if we really want spiritual illumination. So with this, we stop our discussion today. We will continue with the remaining portion of the lecture again in the next class. Thank you all.
Thank you, Swamiji. Namaskar.
Namaskar.
Namaskar. Pranam, Swamiji.
Namaskar.
Pranam Swamiji.
Namaskar.